It's Laura. Today I want to talk about women's bodies and tattoos and what society thinks about it. I'm going to talk about this book, Covered in Ink by Beverly, Yuen, Thompson. It came out in 2015, and she also did a documentary series, which is on YouTube. It is called Covered. It came out before about 2010. The research for the book and the video was done between 2007 and 2010. And between the video and the book, they're really complementary, and it's interesting to read the book, but it's also very interesting to see the documentary, and they talk about the subject in a little bit different kind of way. And I also want to talk about this book, and you'll see how this is relevant a little bit later on. It is She's the One by Kate Collins. She is a female tattoo artist, and this is a book that she did. And I will come back to this one. Let me first give you a brief overview of the book. There is an introduction, and she talks about her feelings about being a tattooed woman, how she got into getting tattoos and her interest in it. Then the first chapter is called Sailors, Criminals, and Prostitutes. It's more about the history of the stigma in tattooing and looking at people from society. What is the stigma of having a tattooed body? Chapter 2 is called I Want to Be Covered, and it is about really heavily tattooed women and how that challenges the dominant beauty culture. What's interesting about this study that I hadn't seen really talked about before is she doesn't just talk about a tattooed person. She talks about lightly tattooed versus heavily tattooed, and her focus is more what is the impact on the heavily tattooed person, specifically women. Third chapter is I Heart Mom, which is really talking about family reactions to women with tattoos. Chapter 4 is fascinating, especially for me. It's called Covering Work, and it talks about how people view tattoos in the workplace and what are the laws regarding discrimination for that, and politics of dress codes. Chapter 5 is called Is the Tattoo Guy Here? And it's specifically about women in the industry of tattooing and what is that experience like to be a female tattooer in what used to be a very heavily dominant male culture. Chapter 6 is Tattoos Are Not for Touching. It talks about kind of the public space and stigma surrounding tattoos and what social sanctions are put on people who have them and how they're viewed. And it gives a lot of personal experiences on interactions that people have had. She wraps it up with the final chapter with conclusions. Following that is notes and an index and a little bit of information about her. This is Beverly. And like I said, the first chapter talks a little bit about how she became a tattooed person and what it means to her. I Want to Be Covered. Here's an image from that chapter. Talks about women who are seeking to have a lot of tattoos and what that means, and breaking the dominant beauty culture, how becoming heavily tattooed, or what is perceived as heavily tattooed, especially for women, which is different than for men, let's be fair, what that does to the dominant beauty culture, how it questions it, how it breaks it, and the reactions women have to being in that space. So she discusses, what is an okay tattoo for a woman to have. And it's interesting because the difference between being lightly tattooed or being heavily tattooed is a focus that I haven't heard a lot of people discuss. It's either in a sociology kind of study, which this is a sociology or ethnography kind of cultural study book. You're tattooed, you're in a box, you're either tattooed or you're not tattooed. And she looks at it as acceptable tattooing versus, crossing some kind of a line. And what would be considered acceptable is the location, being somewhere small or hidden, the size, and also the subject matter. So, little flowers or butterflies or something like that. It's a little bit of script, acceptable for females. But skulls and snakes and tough stuff and larger work and more visible work crosses over some kind of a line into a place where it's not acceptable as a beauty expression for women. And the crap that all the women get, like, why you're so pretty, why would you do this to yourself, kind of stuff, delves into a little bit of the factors driving women to want to be heavily tattooed and how they feel about being that way. I think it's interesting because there's so much pressure in the dominant beauty culture with photographs, with advertisements, and images that we all see, that none of it is obtainable. Even the models are heavily airbrushed, so even the models aren't attainable to be what they're portrayed as. And looking at women who are deviating or alternative to the normative beauty culture and the whys and hows of that, it's fascinating. And the feeling that you get from both the fuck you to society aspect of it, as well as the empowerment of claiming your body and disallowing society to claim it for you. That's interesting. I am recently reading a book on Helen of Troy. And I was like, gosh, I should really get back into the tattoo thing, because it's the same thing. It's the commodification of beauty. It is the perception that the public owns the female body, owns the female image. And when you break that, when you cross a line that you're not supposed to cross with your own body, with the ownership of your own body, it gives women a power that, frankly, I think some in society are worried about. They're scared of that. They see the power of that, and they know that they can't own that. And that creates a lot of fear. And I think that's, predominantly what the backlash is relating to. She also talks a little bit about how body modifications, and you can put plastic surgery into the body modification category, as even more extreme than getting piercings or getting tattoos, in terms of just the raw procedure and what is going on. But how that very much more extreme body modification is actually normalized in the beauty culture versus tattooing, which is pushed to the side as alternative or degrading or damaging to the body, when in reality the acceptable plastic surgery options are considered more feminine, more beautiful, and encouraged. So those are really fascinating discussions to have in the context of tattooing and how it makes you feel. And actually touching back into a little bit of the movie, the book has some interviews and clips and photos, but it's more of a philosophical discussion of these issues, versus her documentary series has the interviews, talks to the women who she uses as her subjects, and gives them a voice that you can actually see. It's a lot more image driven. So between the two of them, it's a nice document on the topic. Chapter 4, covering work, dress code, and the politics of tattoos and the work environment and the legal implications. Again, I thought that was interesting. She has a couple of cool photos of working women. This is one that I particularly like, with a lawyer showing her day and evening look, her tattooed and covered look. But so anyway, this covered game, it's a game that I play. I usually don't show my tattoo work or reveal my complete self to clients initially, and frequently when I'm on the job site, I do keep very well covered up for a number of reasons. it can be a bit much. It can be kind of distracting, and I just kind of want to get on with the job. But yeah, I'll talk about my own experiences maybe another time. But so let's get back on the chapters. Chapter 5 is the tattoo guy here? So this chapter talks about women tattoo artists and their experiences in the field. I enjoyed this chapter a lot because of its link to working in a male-dominated profession. I also like it because I think it's important to feature women getting on with the business of doing what they want to do and how they cope and how they just get on with it. I don't think that we really need to differentiate and separate them out, but it's very interesting from their side of the story to hear what they've gone through and what their feeling is on the subject. And that's kind of how this one comes in. Chapter 6 is tattoos are not for touching. And this goes into, again, what I was mentioning about public beauty. What is that, and how does society really claim women's bodies? So when you think of what is the value of a person, the notion of beauty for women always comes up. That goes along with age, as appearance, and shape. Too young, too beautiful, too old, too whatever. And the whole politics of how women's bodies are monetized, and also there's a sense of ownership over them, and how tattoos, especially for women who have a lot of tattoos, can really break that cycle for the women and also for society, confronting society. And a lot of people have strong reactions to heavily tattooed women because they just feel like they should control them. And this is obviously a situation which shows them you are not in control in a very obvious visual way. Then the final chapter that she talks about is conclusions, and it wraps up the story, kind of reviewing the different points that she's made through it. It's heavily referenced, lots of great sources. She also does spend some time talking about her methodology, how many people were involved in the study, who they were, as well as being really realistic about what her limitations were with the study. My biggest complaint with the book was that it was too brief. I wanted more. I was very interested in the subject matter she was covering, and every chapter would end and I'm like, I want more. I think it's an area that is rich for future study. I found it pretty well written. It was very well researched, very well constructed and supported with her claims. Fascinating personalities are in here. And if you also watch her documentary Covered, you'll meet some of the people that she talks about. So how does that relate to this one? Kate Collins is an artist in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and she's a tattooer, and she is very influenced by punk rock culture, music, horror, and stuff that isn't considered girly. And I think that she really visually epitomizes kind of what the other book is about. This like ladies who just say fuck you to society and be a punk. And I like it also because she's a female tattooer, and to see her work, to celebrate her work and look at her work as part of the context of what was in the study of Covered in Ink, and see the vibrancy of women's work in the tattoo field is great. I also wanted to get it because I want to support, and there she is, Kate. You can get her more of her stuff. I'm wearing one of her shirts too. Kate, wee. Kate, I like supporting tattoo artists in general. So if they have art that you can purchase, or books or t-shirts or anything. So yeah, I just thought that visually this book kind of tied right into the other one, and it gives me a chance to tell you about her. So what are my views on this? This is a topic that I do spend a lot of time thinking about. I am an architect, so I am in a predominantly male-dominated industry. When I go out on the job site, I'm almost always the only woman who's working. I do feel a kinship for a lot of people who are in non-traditional roles for their gender. Either way, there's a lot of pushback. And I wonder if it isn't one of the things that drove me personally to want to be tattooed or express myself in a non-traditional way. I think also a lot of that is trying to diminish the possibility of vanishing. Women also have this layer of, as they age, they become less valuable because our beauty diminishes, our value diminishes, and older women are just disappeared out of culture, out of society. And by tattooing myself, or by coloring my hair, or by wearing certain clothes, or being the profession that I am in such a strong way, I'm fighting that disappearing act that society is trying to pull on me. And reading these books about strong women in their field, and seeing Kate's artwork, highlighting punk women, powerful women, women who don't give a fuck, women who just go about their day and do what they want to do, be who they want to be. I find it very inspiring. Yeah, so I guess the final thing that I'll bring up is the, why would you do this to yourself thing? And how does it feel to be liberated from that beauty culture and to break that beauty culture? And I think for a lot of people who go into the heavily tattooed realm, especially for women, because it is seen as much more deviant for women to cross that line, to have very visible, very large, very strong imagery, masculine imagery. And does that destroy their femininity? To them, it doesn't. To society, it depends, I guess. I think society thinks it does. It does diminish them. But there's a liberation with not caring about that and obviously visibly rejecting culture. Overall, I think women who do that and embrace themselves in that way ultimately are happier. I would recommend this book, and I would recommend her video as well. I hope there's a lot more people who are going to do this kind of work in the future. And I also very much enjoy Kate's book, and I hope you support your local artist, male or female. Buy some swag, buy some books. So on that note, I hope you're doing great, and I hope to see you again, and hope you like this kind of content. Please comment on your experiences. I would really like to have a dialogue on this kind of topic. I think there's a lot of things to discuss here. Have a fantastic day.